announcements.
All right, we're going to get underway. Bob, yes?
Yes,
All right, before we start, pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and in line with social distancing guidelines followed during the COVID-19 pandemic, all Port Council members are participating remotely in today's meeting because their physical attendance today would be unreasonably difficult. All Port Council members are participating in the meeting by the Zoom video conferencing app, and all members will be clearly audible to each other. As a result of the members' remote participation in this meeting, any and all votes taken by the members today shall be by roll call vote. I would also like to inform everyone that Sean Driscoll, the authority's communications director, is also making an audio and video recording of today's meeting. Is there anyone else making an audio recording of today's meeting? If so, please identify yourself by pressing the raise your hand icon, or if you are joined by phone, pressing *9 on your keypad, and when you are recognized, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
don't see anybody.
All right. Before we go into the minutes, approval of the minutes and discussion, I would like to pass it to Bob. He'd like to say a few words.
All right, well, good morning. I think we are going to start on a little somber note here. Since the Port Council last met, we were saddened to hear the passing of George Balco back on April 10th. George was appointed to the Port Council in January of 2009 and represented Tisbury for 12 years before stepping down at the end of 2020. During his time in the Port Council, George lent his valuable expertise on a number of important issues and projects that had come up, the development and launch of the MV Woods Hole, the start of the Woods Hole Terminal reconstruction project, and the development of our fuel hedge program. So George's wisdom and insight is going to be missed, and he made us a better organization while he was a member of the Port Council. So please join me in a moment of silence for in memory of George Balco. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
All right, back to the first item on the minutes is the approval of minutes from April 5th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Nat Lowell. Discussion. All right, hearing none, I will ask for a roll call vote. Joe Solito,
Yes.
Rob Munier,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
and Mark Reese.
Aye.
All right, and John Cahill, aye.
Mr.
Been on
Chairman,
item- Yes, sir.
if I may, before you go any further, is there any chance that we may be able to get the minutes of the meeting and the packet by Friday, a Friday night, so we could review them over the weekend? I didn't get it till yesterday, and there was like 150 pages that I was trying to read yesterday. Any chance of getting those like on a Friday night so we can read them over the weekend?
Our goal is Thursday. So
Pardon me?
What's
our
that?
goal is Thursday.
Yes.
To get
Okay,
those.
if you, that's even better.
Great.
Also, I'll give somebody a call if I could have these sent to my personal email. It's kind of hard reading them on that small tablet.
All right. Anything else, Joe?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Item number 2, management report, starting off with our current projects. Bob?
Okay, well, first off, before in the barn here on Palmer Ave, Sean Driscoll is running the Zoom for us. Terrence Keneally, Mark Amundson, Angela Campbell, Janice Kennefick, and Bill Cloutier is in the room as well. So first off, we start off with the update on the website redesign, and Ron has some members from ADK that they'll be bringing over.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Sean.
I'm not used to going first, so I was surprised. Clear doesn't have to come up today. So just a brief update before I turn it over to ADK. We're in sort of the transition right now between the focused innovation phase and the building and beyond phase, which really just means that we're continuing to create the foundational design and user experience elements for the website and working on the certain workflows and rapid prototyping of some elements that Sam's going to talk more about. Our public engagement has been ongoing via the biweekly e-news and website updates, and we've also been asking customers to volunteer for conversations with ADK via a post-purchase email that was going out. The response was so robust that we had to add more time spots, and Sam got very busy in a very quick hurry. So that was great to get that feedback, and we've also been reaching out to users who volunteered for some prototype testing when we did our survey in 2021, had a lot of good response there as well. So we're not lacking for customers wanting to share their thoughts with us. In your packet, I did distribute the monthly summary of our sprint reports, and I'm going to turn it over now to Sam Zoloff, who's the head of growth strategy at ADK, to review some work done to date, and we've also got other project leads on the call should we need to tap them in. But Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
All righty, thank you so much, Sean. And like Sean said, I work on a portion of this project. I have my teammates on the line as well who go deeper in the more technical and design aspects. So should questions come up, I might pull them in to give you a more detailed answer. But I do have a short deck I would love, or a presentation slideshow that I would love to walk through. And so at a very high level, I'm attempting to summarize months of work into a very quick summary. So we'll try to fly through this as quickly as we can and then open it up to questions so we can focus on what is important to you. This is just an overview of our process. Like Sean said, we are now in these two phases. We straddle multiple phases and approaches at one time as that is generally benefiting the agile methodology that we follow for project delivery. And then in terms of a more timeline, you can see this is where we are here. We've completed this bucket of work and we are on track for the rest of the timeline. I'll pause here because there are a lot of small text for folks to take that in for a sec before moving on.
Hey, Sam, maybe just, could you, if you wouldn't mind me interrupting, just what's the main goal?
The main goal of the entire project, or
Yeah,
sorry,
just
Yeah.
in a synopsis type way.
Yeah,
So we have
yeah.
good context.
Yeah, absolutely. So through research done before we responded to the RFP, there were a number of pain points and opportunities for improvement that were uncovered from the customers and travelers that rely on the steamship. And we've taken those, translated them into opportunities for improvement, have shaped those into a product development plan, and are designing and building that ultimately to create a website and a mobile app that is cohesive and makes purchasing, planning, and managing trips as simple and easy as possible. Okay. So
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So I did want to take this time to show a few highlights of the progress. We'll walk through some of the design highlights, some of the functionality highlights, and then some of the technology that is going to drive all of this forward. Starting with the design. The first real visually stimulating or intriguing aspect that we did, I would say, was with an exercise called style tiles. These are used to help align on the visual direction of the website and the mobile app and create a cohesive visual voice or brand language. There's been previous work done on the brand, so we were doing our best to incorporate those into our designs going forward, as well as keeping a very strict and attentive eye on things like accessibility. So we took a look at some of the color palette and made sure that the contrast levels are appropriate for people who are hard of seeing, and we're making sure that that same attention to detail, same attention to accessibility flows through every aspect of our design and build phase. The way that websites are coded actually has a lot of implications for how people with different needs can or cannot access information. And so what you're seeing here are the style tiles. They're not designs. They're taking aspects of the brand and applying them to elements that you might see on a website.
Sam, I just want to note at this point, all this language is dummy language. Basically, at this point, none of this has been copywritten or reviewed. So don't get too hung up on the words. This is more about the style at this stage.
Yes, thank you, Sean. That's a great point. We use somewhere in between Latin and final language just so that we get the feel for something, but it is by no means final. Okay.
Yep.
And so now you can start to see how we took some of the style tiles and applied them to individual elements that we might see that a customer or a traveler might see on the website, on the mobile app, as they're navigating the site and going and interacting with Steamship Authority. On the left here is a fares and discounts page. We chose to focus on this because it gives us the opportunity to highlight a navigation structure, their persistent booking call to action, some account functionality, and table information. And I'm actually going to zoom in on this because I know that on the presentation, it is very hard to see and it takes a second to render. Yeah. Okay. And then in the second section here, this is an example of a dropdown in the reservation flow. So you can see that the buttons are large, easy to read, they're friendly, they're visual, they're engaging, and they're simplified. So we've really been focused. One of our guiding principles has been how can we pare this down to the least amount of information that a customer can use to still make the decisions and choices that they need and want to make. And then on the right here, one of the aspects that we're really excited about is the sort of what we're calling an in-context availability estimator. That is a super jargony phrase, and I apologize for that. Basically, it's a visual representation of availability in the checkout flow, or sorry, the reservation flow. What I've heard personally I've talked to over 20 people about their experience making reservations, where they get hung up, where they get frustrated. One of the things I've heard overwhelmingly is that the being forced currently to pick a date, see that there's no reservations, go back, pick another date, see that there's no reservations, and back and forth has been a source of a bit of a paper cut, we'll call it. And so bringing a more visual representation of availability into the flow to help people avoid dates that may not have any availability should help alleviate that. And in our tests, like Sean was saying, prototypes with real users or customers, we've seen a really favorable response. One of them even said that she was confident her grandmother could do it. And that's our goal. We want everyone, no matter their age, to be able to find and book trips as easy as possible. So moving on to sort of the next level of fidelity is the functionality. How does this all work together? How does this create a cohesive experience? And so we've taken aspects, some of the core aspects and jobs of the website, focused on those first to de-risk them and make sure that we get those as right as possible and do what we can to make this as easy as possible. So we've put together a prototype, an interactive prototype, and this is one of the ones we were using to get feedback from customers with. And so you can see this is a person who's logged out who might be making a reservation. And so some of the data, and this is built in a design tool, so it's not live data. I'm going to pause here. One of the things we've done is ensure that we get the information upfront needed to make this estimation as accurate as possible.
Hey, Sam, could I ask a question at this point?
Yes.
Is this, which I'm really liking what I'm seeing, by the way, is this real-time availability, like connected to the actual flow of reservations for a vehicle on a
Yeah.
boat?
It's pulled from the reservation system, so it's as real time as we can get.
Okay,
I mean, what you're seeing at this moment is not real. This is a recording.
no, I understand that, yeah, yeah.
It will be pulling availability from boats straight from the reservation system.
In real time, though.
Yes, in real time.
Okay.
And then this just repeats with someone checking out as a passenger versus a vehicle, which is more or less the same. You can actually see, though, that this has dynamically updated. The vehicle dropdown is no longer there, so it's not even something people have to worry about or think about answering. And those are the sort of little touches that we try to pay attention to make sure that we reduce cognitive load, basically the decisions and information that people are presented with, to make sure it's feels more customized to them. It reacts to what they're doing. And then we do have another experience here for a person who is logged in. And we're really excited about this as well, because having customers that are logged in allows us to make it even easier and quicker for them to book new trips. And so you can see this is already pre-populated with with their sort of default or preferred information, their preferred route, their default car, and their frequently traveled with passengers. And so if a person is logged in, all they really need to do in order to make a trip, if they make the same sort of trip many times in a year or time period, is just search for the dates. And this is all interactive, right? So you can, if you do need to change something, you can tweak just that aspect of it.
Sam, if I could ask another question at this point.
Yes.
So that will actually show.
Good morning.
I'm sorry. That example that you just showed would allow someone with a profile to know what is available on a certain date.
Yes. So if a person has a profile and they're logged in,
Yep.
to see availability,
Yep.
all they'll need to do is click departure or return.
And
That
that pop up.
And it's an S. Sorry, Sean?
I was gonna say the availability option is available both if you're logged in to your profile and if you're doing it as a guest. So there's the only real
Yeah, right.
difference would be if you've already have your car selected, so it saves you some steps. But the availability functionality is essentially the same.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Great. And then wrapping up with, well, last but not least, is the technology that will actually allow us to execute on this and that will power all of this and that will give the Steamship Authority team more control and flexibility and scalability with how they evolve the website and the mobile app going forward. And I apologize. The reason we have a project leader who is an engineer is so that he can be more well-versed in this, but I will touch on these at a high level. And if you have any questions, hopefully we'll be able to bring Rob up as well. So like I said, at a high level, we had sort of 3 guiding lights for building the underlying technology, and that is to make it secure, to make it performant, so it can handle a wide range of traffic, we'll say, and needs and information inflow and outflow, and then also ensure that we're making it economical. So there are obviously ways to make technology stacks that are secure and performant that cost an exorbitant amount of money. We were focused on making sure that we could get the best of all 3 worlds. And so what we ended up on is called a Jamstack ecosystem. It is shown here, and yeah. We've also taken an API first approach here, which allows us to better interact with and scale with the underlying reservation system. If anyone is interested in how that works, again, we'll have time for questions and answers, and Rob can go much deeper than I can. And then a note on our mobile approach. We've recommended and landed on going with what's called a progressive web app, which basically means that we are building both the website and the mobile app from one code base, which makes management time and cost much lower. And then we're using a tool called Go Native to turn that progressive web app into a native mobile app. So from a customer perspective, from a user perspective, from a traveler perspective, they will be able to find and download the app in app stores. They'll be able to get push notifications. They'll be able to leverage functionality like biometric logins, where you put Face ID to log in, things like that. On the back end, where they won't see or experience any difference, is just added flexibility and efficiency for managing it going forward. And all of this is really key to reducing long-term technical debt. And this is actually a walkthrough video, again, of a prototype, undesigned, just to prove out the feasibility of this approach, to show how it might look to create and manage a push notification, for example.
This is on the back end. This is not what the customer
Yes.
sees, but it's how we would go through it in theory on our side.
Exactly. And so if the customer had the app open, and again, this is what's shown here is not what the app will look like. Cannot stress that enough. It's purely a prototype to prove out functionality. They might see this notification, and if they don't have the application open, then they'll see the normal sort of drop-down alert. And this will help push relevant and timely updates about customers' trips, for example, and updates and delays and things like that. So this is what it might look like on a lock screen. And then finally, touching on the CMS, or the content management system, we're working with something called Contentful. We've already been able to import all of the current content on the website into Contentful, and we'll be able to keep that up to date while the site is running and while we're still undergoing development. But basically what Contentful does is it in a similar to how using a progressive web app allows us to have one code base and one source of truth to manage the code. Contentful allows us to have one content management source of truth for the website and the native app to ensure that there's parity in experience and content across both, and that the Steamship team has a very robust, easy to use content management system for both the website and the mobile app. And again, all of this behind the scenes, customers, travelers will not see this. And that is everything I had today. I do, if there's time, we're happy to answer questions. Yeah, and I appreciate you hearing us out.
Thank you, Sam. Fellow Port Council members, any questions for Sam or for Sean? I just have a couple, and more towards Sam on this one is on one of the previous slides, you used the word reduced tech debt. Can you just explain what that all refers to?
Yeah. Actually, Sean, if you are able to bring up Rob, he can be much more eloquent about that and be better at translating that concept.
Yeah, I will bring him over.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob. Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm the technical lead on the project. So technical debt, just like any traditional debt, are deficiencies that you gain in a code base over time. So whenever you take shortcuts or whenever you introduce complexity into the project, it eventually gets harder and harder to maintain over time. So a key significant point of that is if we were doing a native mobile app and a website, we would have two separate code bases. So if we made a change in the reservation system to one, we would have to make that change in the other. So you could imagine over time, making a lot of those changes would get just more and more complex. So by reducing our technical debt and helping ourselves in the future, we reduce that technical debt by managing one code base or one repository. So it essentially just means that there's going to be less maintenance hours in the future. It incurs less risk moving forward, and ultimately reduces costs because you only have to do something once, you don't have to do it multiple times over.
Great, thank you for that. And sort of a follow-up to that, and anyone on the three of you guys could answer, is I think some of these new tools are wonderful and I'm really liking what I'm hearing today, but what type of technology maintenance do we have now to incur going forward with this new site? So, you know, we were at a point before with the existing site, we know what those maintenance costs are, but any licensing agreements, any app development and design, what does that world look like as we move off of the launch in the end of this year?
Of course,
That we should be aware of.
I can start that and you can chime in, but you know, that is something that as we've been going through these tools, obviously want to make sure that it's sustainable in the long term and not, we're not going to incur significant new costs. And I see Mr. Rosen's, the corners of his mouth turning up when I say that, then he's happy. But, and part of that, we've been working with Kurt Van Riper, our director of IT, to make sure that he's comfortable with it, because ultimately it's going to come out of his budget. I don't have the figures with me, John, so I can get those to you, but the recurring costs have been modest in the single thousands of dollars per year, not tens of thousands of dollars per month. So these have all been relatively low cost, and you know, our ongoing support with ADK is something that's a contract that we'll be negotiating closer to the end of this process. And then there will be the subscription cost with Contentful and a couple other things. And we're working on, we're keeping that list up to date to make sure we're not buying a snazzy tool that's gonna be really expensive when a tool that's slightly less snazzy, but maybe half the cost will do just the same.
Yeah.
So we'll present final figures obviously once, and I can get the rough figures to you, but that's been top of mind, especially in this phase. We don't want to buy into something that is going to end up being more expensive than we want.
And obviously you'll pass those on to Mark, and Mark will be aware. Mark Rosen.
Yes, we will certainly do that.
All right. And then the one last question, I was speaking with Bob Davis the other day, and he mentioned that David Jensen is on the project.
Yeah, Dave Jensen is with Regan Digital Studio, and that's part of our subsidiary of our longtime marketing and advertising partner, Pierce Cote Advertising. So he is acting as sort of the owner's consultant on it. He's not on the call today, but he's been on, I think, virtually every call that we've had to, listen to the technical aspects of it and to run interference and make sure that what ADK is doing is in the best interest of the authority. Kurt Van Riper is obviously on multiple calls. I mean, I'm serving on this from the big picture point of view, not because I particularly know how to build a website. So, we do have that backup to make sure that what ADK is proposing and we're saying we can do are things that actually can be done and that are in the best interest of the customer and the authority.
Good. And well, I just want to close out. Any more questions from our Port Council members?
Yeah, just a little bit of a follow-up on
Yep.
your
Go ahead,
line of
Rob.
discussion. And I guess for Sean, is your general sort of feeling at this stage of the project, which it looks like you're maybe a third of the way through or thereabouts, you're happy with the way it's headed? And
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's hard to believe it's only been a third of the way through in some aspects of it, but we've been really pleased. The entire team has been, and we have a project team backing me up as well, but we've all been really pleased with the progress so far. ADK is, I'm not saying this just because they're on the call, but they've done a great job of, listening and responding and understanding what's possible and what's not, and working within sort of the limitations that we have currently, but then also helping us think beyond that and what can be sort of on website 2.0. So I'm really pleased with the progress and what we've seen and what we were able to show you today. So I think this is going very well.
All right. Any more questions from the group? I'll just close out that Sam and Rob and also Sean, thank you very much. It's very thorough and I'm impressed. So thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Sam and Rob, and to the whole team.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. So next we have a update on the repair status of the motor vessel Nantucket. So Mark will lead us through that.
Good morning, everyone.
morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Sorry, Mark.
So we're completing our winter dry docks, and the last vessel returning from Thames Shipyard is the Nantucket. She came out of dock on about the 19th and returned on the 25th back to Fairhaven, finishing up the repair schedule at the moment, and for her back in service mid-May. Next slide. Just some photographs of some highlighted areas. A lot of work in shaft seal assemblies. Next. We did both rudders, complete overhauls. That's going back up into the final position. Next. We've spent a lot of time on exterior coatings. We completely blasted with ultra high pressure, blasted to a near white and coatings applications for life extension. Next. So the highlights of the docking, deck coatings, new fire detection system installation, blasting coating of the hull, and propulsion shaft and rudder repairs. And with the project, the main contract value was $1.75 million. We received 330,000 in credits, 337 in change orders. So grand total contract credits and change orders, 1.79 million. Any questions on the Nantucket docking?
Not seeing it.
Nope, nope, not at this point.
Okay, so next is an update on the repairs to the Oak Bluffs Pier.
Do we have a slide on this?
Okay, this is a plan view.
Sorry, it's not updated. There we go.
It's a plan view of the Oak Bluffs terminal. We started phase 1, phase 2 back in 2020, and this is the last phase, which is the underwater wrappings of the piles. Next slide. This is kind of another plan view, which kind of shows the vents and kind of the general location. It's scattered throughout the deck of the piling reps, which we'll get into in a moment. Next slide. So what we've done is we have gone through and identified piles that would like to wrap. The goal is to get a 20-year extension on the piles at Oak Bluffs, and this is done by jetting out at the bottom area of the pile and wrapping the piles to prevent the worm borers from being active in the piles. Next. So this shows just a different view of the piles that have been wrapped. Next. So the contract value was 1.41 million. The pile wraps are now completed, 236 piles wrapped. Installed 6 piles, and that's with jackets, and that will be completed today. And tomorrow will be a demobilization day, and then we're free to finish up some small things for ready to start the season on time. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Mr.
sir. Go
Chairman.
ahead. Yes, sir, Nat.
Mark. Hey, Mark, thank you for that. I was just down in Anna Maria and I took a picture of pilings like this. I never saw this wrapping before. So is this something that's sort of new? Because I don't remember ever seeing anything like this anywhere. So sounds like a good idea. I'm assuming this is post-creosote era stuff, correct?
Yes, well, there's 2 types of approaches here with Greenheart and with creosote, and some of them have been phased out over time. However, when we look at like the Vineyard Haven terminal, the Vineyard Haven terminal was done completely with creosote, and we're just amazed after our analysis and our survey of last year on how well the condition of that is held up. Now, we're looking at this obviously to get as much life extension as we can. And obviously, I think this is an approach. One could say that, maybe you could look at this, at original construction, but now we'd probably use steel pilings if we were to go that route again. So, but this is definitely a life extension.
Okay, that you just sort of took my next question. That was it. Like, so if we were doing, I mean, I don't want to say every project, but the steel, material is going to last longer and is less susceptible to damage, I'm assuming. So we would be using steel pretty much everywhere if we had to rebuild some of these. Like if we did the stuff we've done in Nantucket since 1983 has either been I-beam or the round piles for the slip 1. And is that's sort of the new way of doing it? No more wood for that kind of stuff.
Well, it's that is obviously a newer method, but and we would protect those with anodes as a result. So, there's all in a marine environment, you're going to have different types of application. With wood, you wrap, and with steel, you use anodes, so to protect the. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Mark, if you don't mind, I just want to build on what Nat said. So the wraps that we're using in Oak Bluffs, is that to prolong the usefulness of those pilings? And if so, when are we looking at replacement?
So I think that we went into this with a wide open view of how we can get another 20 to 25 years off it. We identified pilings in phase 1 and phase 2 that we're going to replace because of the worm borers. It got to a point where it was more cost effective, and for the extension period that we needed to replace those pilings. So in others that were not damaged, once you wrap the pilings, what it does is it basically removes the oxygen that the worm borers live in and eradicates them in that method. So I think we got a pretty good plan and long-term plan in place, and I think we're going forward very nicely.
So the wraps would give us another 5, 10, 15, how many years?
Right now, we're looking at, from our original project plan, of a 20-year extension, so we're probably 2040.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Mark, that this is being done on and finishing on time with the season coming up. Again, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks to Bill Cloutier and his crew for helping out. We had a lot going on this winter. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
He probably wants to go. All right, so next item up is an update on the fleet useful life functional obsolescence report. So by way of background, back in March of 2021, asked marine safety consultants with performing a updated useful life functional obsolescence survey. This is to build on the surveys that they had done in 2012 and again in 2018. Going into it, we've been trying to address through our maintenance program from the previous reports that we received, deficiencies in order to extend the useful life of these vessels. And I think in a moment here, we'll show you, what those efforts are doing. But so part of this is also commissioned as part of our due diligence in terms of the vessel replacement program that we're undertaking. Later this month, Elliott Bay Design Group will be presenting to the board, and then we'll get to the Port Council their report on alternative propulsion study that they've been performing since around March of 2021 as well. So these are all elements that we end up trying to tie together on this project. So the report that's been provided from Marine Safety Consultants reports that historically what impacts a vessel's life expectancy, including the age, the construction materials, the method of construction, the scappings, the machinery, the size of the area of service, the sustainability of consistent age escalation maintenance costs, and that's a big one, and regulatory constraints. So while Marine Safety Consultants reports that the average lifespan of an ocean-going commercial vessel is 25 to 30 years, beyond this maintenance cost escalate to the point where it outweighs the operational advantages. We'll point out that we're somewhat different environment in terms of that. They're talking about deep sea ocean-going vessels as opposed to our vessels that run in the sound here. But we'll point out that the average age of our fleet is 34 years old, or 34 years young, as one may take the alternative. So, not surprisingly, Marine Safety Consultants came back saying that the 2 of the 3 freight boats, the Container and the Gayhead in particular, they both were built in 1981. Their useful life, can be extended through a rigorous maintenance program, but it will come to a point where the cost of repairs or the availability of replacement parts in some cases may make that not a desirable route to be taken. Some of the equipments, for instance, the bow thrusters on those two vessels. There is apparently the company has one technician for the US that deals with those. So it would be, we'd be when that person retires, we'd be in a position that if, in-house staff isn't able to maintain those, we would be looking at, a capital expense of replacing bow thrusters on them. So again, this didn't come as a surprise to staff, but it's been something that we've been working on over the years. And Sean, why don't you put up the. So what I did is I put together the two, the three surveys that they had done for the vessels. And you'll see that, for each one of them, the Eagle back in 2012, they expected it to be 16 to 18 years of useful life. Here we are 10 years later, and we're still at 12 to 14 years. So the present, the efforts that we're doing in terms of trying to preserve these vessels, Mark's program of, the code, making sure we have good coatings, hull plate replacement and the like is, looks like it is working. You have the Gay Head there, 1981. So 2012, it was a 10 to 12 years. It had dropped to 5 to 7. 4 years later, it's now 3 to 5. But again, that can be extended as you look at the next one. The Governor has been 5 to 7 years each time. And it's a matter that in between that 2012 and the 2018 survey, we did a very extensive dry docking of that vessel and replaced a lot of hull plate on that vessel and updated it. So, it remains, in that same area, and it's just a matter of, ongoing maintenance. The Island Home, the INO, have a good long life ahead of them. The Katama, much like the Gay Head, actually 8 to 10 initially, and that has come down. The Sankaty, meanwhile, is right in the same ballpark as it's the two others, two other freight boats, and then you see the Nantucket. And this 2022 survey of the Nantucket is more regarding the Nantucket is regarding the usability of the freight deck. It's becoming harder and harder to maintain with the car sizes getting bigger, wider, and that it makes it more difficult to be, the functionality of that boat. But again, it's it's a solid vessel, and very, all these vessels are safe to be operating. And then the Martha's Vineyard, you'll see there that between there you had the midlife refurbishment of the Martha's Vineyard. So we're at the same number of years, and the Woods Hole shall serve the authority well for the coming decades. So, but based on this, in staff's firsthand knowledge of the fleet, again, it's not totally unexpected on where they were focusing on and identifying what vessels would probably be the next that would need to be replaced. We've also been performing some investigations of potential opportunities to acquire and modify available offshore supply vessels, or OSVs. Yeah. Similar to the freight boats, our existing freight boats, the Gay Katama and the Sankaty all began their life as a OSV, and we acquired them and converted them, and they've performed service well over the years. So with the downturn in the offshore oil exploration, we've identified that there's a number of OSVs that are available, and so we've been looking at those to see if that's an alternative. We should be going for a vessel replacement program. As part of that, we have had condition surveys performed on some vessels that we had identified as a good target to be looking at, as well as having a naval architect working on what the conversion cost and the timeline would be for those vessels. So this survey that was performed is just part of that whole vessel replacement program. This is something we've been working on now for over a year to make sure, to see what the next steps are going to be. And, we're getting to a point where the available bonding limits that we have are going to be to the point where whether it's a new vessel or, some replacement vessels that are used that we'll be looking to do. So. And with that, if anyone has any questions or if Mike has anything to add.
Just to add a few things, we're placing a lot of time in coating refurbishment. This is to protect the existing steel hull plating and decks for the life of the vessel to maintain in its status as it is now. So some of the equipment obsolescence, as Bob was referring to, we now, with a number of the thrusters under the same manufacturer, we are down to our last technician. So there will be a point where we will not get the support from the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, that we have in the past, and that's very concerning to me personally. Thank you.
Any questions among the members, of Bob or of Mark?
Yeah, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
for it, Nat.
So this is I lose sleep over this useful life stuff. So I'm really, really excited about this, finally bringing this back to normal. I was going to say the Nantucket is on its second cycle of useful life, right? Should be already replaced twice if we went with all these fancy ways of analyzing. So the Uncatina was replaced because it had one truck lane, not because it was unfixable or too old or something. The Islander, we all know why that was replaced, and it wasn't because it wasn't running right anymore. It was actually running fine. The Noshan, we know why we replaced that. So, I look at this as our vessels that we currently have are too valuable to replace, in the sense of that we have a great maintenance system of like familiarity, which Mark just kind of alluded to with something. And I think that, we need to take a step back and get going on these vessels down south, because this is an opportunity of a lifetime. We've never had the ability to get, let's just hypothetically say 3 or 4 gay heads all at the same time, already lengthened, already widened with a wide hull, all with the same engines, same generators. I mean, it's like buying 4 brand new cars exactly the same, or trucks or whatever. So this is a smart move. I mean, this is, one-time thing. Like, we've never had this happen. So that gives us so much time to figure out what the next vessel is going to be from scratch, which could be anything at this point. 3 years ago, we were talking about liquefied natural gas. So I don't hear anybody talking about that now, do I? So anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone that went on their little trip, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Nat,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Mark, is there any way that we could send somebody from the Steamship Authority to go to technician school to learn how to do these thrusters?
A lot of it's proprietary information, and the first step is, and we were a bit surprised, but we were notified a couple of years ago that, what happens is companies, they have an engineering group within the group, and when they stop supporting that, and I can see there's one technician left from this particular company, and the Katama and the Gayhead have the same bow thrusters. And so we've been increasing our spare parts inventories, but there's going to be a point where if we have a problem and need engineering support, so it's not just a mechanical aspect. The mechanical aspect can be taken care of directly by the shipyards. It's not hands and feet per se. It's a technical support when you have a problem other than just the sheer part replacement, and that comes up quite often.
They don't have any independent people that you could talk to that worked for this company at some point in time?
Well, they're down to that last person who I can talk to. It's a matter of when we have any one of our bow thrusters, and we have various types within the fleet, we always have a service representative, field service representative, because they have proprietary drawings which they don't give out, to the rest of, to anyone, because that's how they make their living, is off the service of those bow thrusters. And so the answer to it is there'll always be people to work on it, but when you have a problem and you're in the dry dock, you don't get that OEM, original equipment manufacturer, technical engineering support. And that's the concern, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments before we move on? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of interesting stuff in the report. I guess this first comment would be, and maybe I just didn't hunt hard enough, but it would be useful for us to get reports like that as soon as they're released rather than in our package. And maybe it was available. I wasn't aware of it, only because it's already, seen the light of day, been reviewed by the Board of Governors, and now we're looking at it based on having gotten our package. So if it could have been available earlier and highlighted, it would have had us be more informed, because obviously this is already had quite a bit of publicity around it. I'm sort of have sort of mixed thoughts in Matt's point about we have this opportunity, potentially one chance of a lifetime, which is opportunistic, and then there's the other side of that, which is what's our plan? And it's nice to have a plan that is got a strategy to it, and I sort of take this report as like the baseline from which you would then develop a plan, i.e. what's your timeline, when you're going to retire certain vessels, when you're going to replace them, so on and so forth. Sort of a game plan that you would try to play to, but obviously as events dictate, maybe it gets adjusted a little bit. There's not a whole lot of financial information in the report, and I'm sure you have tons of it. It would seem like each vessel has a return on investment that you could calculate, and you could determine how much you're spending on the vessel and if it's accelerating over time. And so that there's a piece to this that is not just a survey, but what is the cost of running a particular ship, and how are those costs changing, and does that help drive a decision that you might want to make? As far as the going down to the Gulf and finding a boat, the issue with that is you're going to find a boat and you're going to have to make a decision, because that boat's going to be gone sometime shortly thereafter, if it's a good deal. So we would have to be in a position to make such a decision, but unless we're just doing an exercise for the purpose of becoming educated. And then of course, when you decide to implement that idea, market conditions could be different, and that certainly the vessel that you might have looked at wouldn't necessarily be available. So I think there's a balancing act there of opportunistic versus strategic. And I guess my final point, and I guess it's a question, and that is, now that you've got this report, what are the steps you're going to be taking to implement a plan or develop a plan that would then be implementable? So a couple random thoughts there.
All good ones.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that, John, for a second, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'd also like to hear Bob or Mark mention, but go ahead, Matt.
Well, this is, plan. That word needs to be broken down into short-term, mid-term, long-term, in my opinion, of how these things end up working. So island interchangeability needs to be always brought up when these conversations come up. Because once again, you forget the Nantucket route can't have every boat on it. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts. These freight boats, sort of as we've moved away from passengers piling onto the Eagle and unloading at 11:30 on Nantucket on a Saturday, 600 people walking off the slow boat. We don't have that anymore. We haven't had that for really almost 20 years. So the freight boats plug all the gaps for passenger vessels that have mixed loads, okay? And we just need mixed loads with small passenger capacities. Your place is completely different. You're like we used to be, okay? Before the fast boats, when airplanes were buzzing over the top of everybody's roof, with everyone complaining and whining about that. So I see this as an oddball opportunity, because when we bought, you guys don't know this either, but the Sankaty, we passed on buying the Sankaty for a while, and we ended up paying more money for it than we could have got it at the time we got offered it. But here we are with 4 if you want to include the new Islander, the Governor, and built, by the way, the same year the U-2 spy plane was built, which is still working great. Just so you know. And so I think that there's more than just a plan for a boat. It really is about, it was a no-brainer to build the island home. You wanted a double ender. You got your double ender. You spent a little bit more money to have that happen, but you were replacing a nostalgic vessel. We replaced the Noshan, which was the ugliest boat on the face of the earth, but boy, did it running through the ice. And we replaced it with the Eagle. Everybody hated the Eagle until everybody fell in love with the Eagle. Okay, that's how it works over here. So we have a different, I don't even like saying plan. We have a different circumstance facing us with the next vessel, because we really don't know what that should be. But I can tell you this freight boat idea, to me, is as simple as the INO decision, as the Island Home decision, is just as easy, because this makes so much sense and plugs so many gaps and so many holes and fills so many voids. It's unbelievable. So thank you. I just had to say all that. Bob, the interchangeability issue, I'd ask you to kind of make a better comment on that than me, but you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Nat. Bob or Mark, can you take a stab at responding to some of Rob's comments?
Yeah, and they're very good points in terms of the planning, short-term, long-term, mid-term. This all started again back in the spring of last year, where we started focusing again on vessel replacement program. First step, one of the first steps was to be looking at, get a condition, an independent evaluation of the condition of the vessels that we have. We suspected, that a particular direction would need to be taken, but we weren't on what would be the most likely candidate that needs to be replaced. But we wanted to get some confirmation of that from an independent source. We're also looking at the alternative power propulsion study in terms of what opportunities we have there in terms of greening the fleet, so to speak. This is similar to what we did back in, the 2012 one was done in when we started to look at for what the replacement was, what was anticipated to be the replacement for the Governor, which came to Woods Hole, but then the Governor is, we were better off keeping the Governor and having that as a seasonal vessel. It freed up a lot of our repair time, so that way we're able to send a vessel during the summertime to dry dock. It opened up more time for us to be able to spend on dry dockings and repairs in the off season for our other vessels. So these are all things that come into play with this. Back when we were going through the process for the what ultimately ended up being the Woods Hole, we did look at an alternative of a converting an OSV. At that time, the OSVs were demand for those was high, and the cost benefit of acquiring one then and converting it wasn't significantly different than building the Woods Hole to get something that was of a age-wise would provide the authority with decades of service as well. So this is all a process that we're going through, and yes, at this point we have been looking very closely at some of these OSVs, and you're right, they don't stick around. We've seen that firsthand, Mark and myself, as to what's going on down in the Gulf. So, but as I said, we're trying to do our due diligence there in terms of getting surveys done of the vessels and the machinery and things like that, and also an evaluation of what conversion cost there would be to see whether this is a viable route for us to be going down. And we expect to be wrapping that up here in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'd anticipate. We'll be getting the propulsion study first, and then I think we'll be able to nail down some of these other estimates as to whether that's a route the board and the Port Council board wishes us to go through. So, and I think Nat's comment about in this particular case, looking at these OSVs, I think one of the things has been that we have 10 vessels, and the closest two would be in sister ships are the Container and the Gayhead, but they differ. And some of the OSVs that the OSVs that we've been exploring, they're Xerox copies of one another. You could be standing on one and not realize which vessel you're on. So, and I think that in terms of the advantages there, in terms of parts inventory, also in terms of crew training and familiarity with them, if this ends up being a route that we go down. So, but I think the replacement for the Woods Hole at this point, we're probably looking at somewhere in the area of about $45 million. With the Tier 4 engines as the baseline there. Our bonding limit, unless it's raised, we're gonna have to wait another year before we can do that, so.
Bob, I think you got a question.
Yeah, I guess I would just, Nat makes a great point about you got to pull a trigger if it's a great opportunity, so on and so forth. But I certainly would be asking the question about putting that type of an action in the context of a bigger plan. And what are the parameters around which we want to acquire new ships? In other words, do we have certain criteria that are important to us? For example, how much fuel they use, how interchangeable they are. Nat's point about whether they can be used on either route, or all the different things that would make up the criteria we would use to make a decision. Because it's certainly easy to go buy a boat. You can do that anytime, but then you're going to have that boat for 35 years, and so you got to do it in the context of a plan.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
If I could just sort of build on what Rob was saying, that chart you had earlier about the list of the boats and their useful life. Is there a way to extend out a couple of columns where you're actually talking about the maintenance costs and the increase of maintenance costs on those boats, so that we can see as Port Council members, that old boat is now costing us a heck of a lot on maintenance. And it goes back to Rob's point about understanding the financials a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be able to see in that the rising dry dock costs that we have been accumulating lately. I mean, you just saw our project, the 1.75 million for the Nantucket. And as the life of a vessel goes on, if you're gonna protect the steel, the coating investment, and I'll emphasize the word investment, gets to a point where it far offs, I won't say far offsets, but it offsets the normal operating costs. And I think you will see that, particularly in the Nantucket and some of the older boats, including all the freight boats.
So we could put that chart together and, and maybe a little bit more financial analysis as we push this forward up to the Board of Governors, because I think that's our primary role. Is not, as going back to Rob's, I'm not necessarily supporting a plan, though it's a good idea. We should at least be able to say, we're at the point right now where these vessels are costing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I know Mark has all that data in terms of repair cost and dry dock cost, and, you know, it's on our vessels, we dry dock them every other year, even though some of them don't require it to be that frequent, but we feel it's better for the preservation method efforts that we're doing, and also to kind of for balancing the budget in terms of you know, what costs of what. So we don't go from a year where we only have 3 boats in dry dock to a year we have 7 boats in dry dock. So we kind of balance it off there. So.
Yeah,
Rob,
and there's an obvious other factor right now, and that's fuel consumption. You know, it's a dramatically different time now than it was even a year ago, let alone 2 years ago. And there's opportunities for reduced fuel consumption based on what you acquire, and how it's powered, et cetera, et cetera. So there's, you know, that's become a bigger factor than it was just a short time ago.
Just one other comment on the container. We've had 2 unscheduled dry dockings between the statutory dry dockings to take care of voyage repairs and structural steel.
Can I make one more point, Mr. Chairman, on this? Hopefully
Go
this
ahead.
might kind of cap things a little bit to this sort of to Mark, I guess. I'm not sure exactly, but so how much did the Nantucket cost to build, Bob, in 1974? I was in the 5th grade. What, about 4 million?
Yeah, I want to say it's somewhere around 5.5 to 6, but.
Ooh,
So,
I don't have. Okay. Yeah, so that's 3 dry docks. So what did the Eagle cost? 8 million? 9?
Somewhere in the 9, it was under 10 million, I know that.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. Now, you know, the problem is the cost, and we have to pay for the boat, which we didn't even brought that up yet. The cost of replacing one boat today has outstripped the maintenance of a good solid boat versus a boat that's obsolete for other reasons. Hey, to plug that in too. Like, I mean, there's certain, when you retire a boat, there's a reason for it. Okay, notice I didn't go back beyond like into the Knobsco era. That's not necessary because we all know why that was. But we got rid of things because of obsolescence, not because of mechanical malfunctioning or whatever. And I just, you know, what would the Island Home cost now? 65 million? I mean, it's kind of scary. That's just one boat. It doesn't even come to Nantucket. So we have to, part of our planning is more about maintenance, upkeep of existing vessels. How much, you know, what are we going to do with the situation? You know, for example, another issue is Hyannis Harbor. the depth of the channel. Like there are a lot of parts to this. Rough weather. The summer maintenance that Bob talked about with the governor is a huge issue. We get better, I'm assuming, Mark, we get better bidding or better flexibility by having one freight boat off in the summertime for maintenance. That's a lot easier for scheduling, for staff and so forth. So there's so many moving parts to this. It doesn't just come down to, buying a new car versus buying a 4-year-old car. You know what I mean? So anyway, I just appreciate the conversation. I'm thrilled that we're even having it. It's too bad there isn't some of the newspapers listening so we could get some real coverage instead of all this gloom and doom stuff out of my tree. But anyway, I'm really glad we're having this. So thank you all for that.
All right. Any more conversation we want to have on this issue? Seeing none, let's move on to the next topic. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
All right,
Thank
so
you,
we
Mark.
Thank you.
just want to provide the Port Council with an update on the request from 41 North Offshore for a license agreement with the Steamship Authority to operate a tug and barge freight service pilot program from New Bedford to Nantucket. So again, they had proposed a mid-May to mid-October to 70 trips, round trips during the course of that period. The primary customer is anticipated to be UPS as their initial, as they phrase it, their initial seed customer. So in accordance with the authority's licensing of private vessel transportation services, we placed advertisements and notices and posted for a public hearing, which was held back on Tuesday, April 19th. The license policy requires that includes that the authority must make certain that the islands are provided adequate transportation. The authority must be certain that additional license services do not adversely affect its financial situation. The authority shall consider the financial health of the grandfathered services. Traffic growth is a concern, and the authority shall consider when evaluating license requests. And the authority shall not grant any license unless the carrier demonstrated it has the ability to provide the proposed service, and whether there's any physical impacts on the proposed new service. So we went through 41 North's proposal. We looked at their financial, staff made a determination that they were a viable entity. They actually provide barge service already to Nantucket in terms of aggregate and modular homes that they bring over. So they're very familiar with our facility over there in Nantucket. So from a financial aspect, the estimate that was prepared, if they're successful in the proposed service, the financial impact to the authority would be a loss of some $208,000 in freight revenue on the Nantucket route, and that was based on an average of 3 trucks per barge. And then for comparison purposes, in 2020, the Nantucket route had a total freight operating revenue of $15,570,000. So that's about 1.3% of the freight revenue. The staff was looking at the wharfage and dockage tariff, and the wharfage fee is set at $1 per foot. So the barge and the tug would be about 200 feet. So the fee would be $200 for transit. We did point out to the board that fee, because this hasn't come up. That fee hasn't been adjusted since 1989. That was the last time it was adjusted. So that'll be something that we'll be looking at going forward to update that. The only part of that tariff that we've adjusted in the past have been the aggregate rates for offloading, and this is a different situation, and it's come up here in 30 years. But at the meeting that we held on Friday, April 29th, the board did approve a one-year pilot program. I did raise Mr. Reese's concerns about the direction that the trucks would come in. I raised that with the board as we did also with the operators of the service. And the operators of the service agreed that the most convenient route, the easiest route for the shippers to be coming in would be to Route 18 there, and they'd be on the correct side of the bridge if the bridge is open to be able to still access their facilities. So, but it was not specifically included as a requirement, but it is something that will be passed along to any of the shippers. So.
So to that point, it's, obviously my participation in this panel is limited to protecting Fairhaven's concerns or addressing Fairhaven's concerns. I'm a little disappointed that the Steamship Authority Board didn't take a more proactive role in requiring them to do the Route 18 route as opposed to going through Fairhaven and leaving it to the discretion of the carrier to obviously it's preferable for Route 18 for a lot of purposes, but I think it would have been nicer if they were a little stronger in their statement saying that is the only route they should take unless the circumstances prevent them from doing that.
I think part of it is that they're looking at this as clearly a pilot program to see, and if there would be any, continuation of, requests to continue this, that, any of those concerns that if they manifest into a problem would be something that would have to be addressed going forward.
And I respect the authority's position on this, but again, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't express my displeasure in the way it was approached.
Really noted. Okay. Nothing else. Next item then would be the Urban Harbors report on off-Cape freight transportation services for the island of Martha's Vineyard. So in 2021, staff became aware that the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, or MassDOT, research program had contracted with Urban Harbors Institute of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, to perform a study. The study titled "Exploring Short Sea Shipping as an Alternative to Non-Bulk Freight Trucking in Southeastern Massachusetts" was undertaken as part of the program, which was funded from the Federal Highway and the State Planning and Research Funds. So we've included in your packet the report. I'll just quote a couple pieces of it. According to the executive summary, the purpose of the research project was to examine the potential effects on highway congestion and total emissions from trucks and ferries carrying non-bulk freight to Martha's Vineyard of a shift in the port of departure return from Woods Hole as an alternative Massachusetts port. The objective of such a shift being to remove freight trucks from roadways leading to and on to Cape Cod and utilizing waterborne transportation for a greater portion of the trip. This is consistent with the interest of the nation and the Commonwealth to better incorporate navigable waterways into our freight transportation system when a waterborne mode or short sea shipping reduces roadway congestion and improves more efficient and economically beneficial. So the stated goals obviously were to understand the current freight practices and conditions and capacity of the ports, to analyze the potential to shift some amount of non-bulk freight to an alternative mainland port, and to characterize and quantify the effects of this potential shift on traffic congestion and emissions. The methodologies that they use were threefold: to assess the practical alternative Massachusetts ports to handle additional freight traffic, to assess the divertible freight truck traffic by reviewing data and information from past studies, and third, to quantify the potential difference in roadway congestion in truck and vessel emissions between the existing conditions and moving non-bulk freight through Woods Hole on the shift and moving it, at least some of the freight through an alternative mainland port. So the conclusions of the report, as I think I may have mentioned at last meeting, was roadway volume attributed to non-bulk freight in 2019, as analyzed as a percentage of road traffic, shows that less than 0.14% of the traffic over the bridges and less than 2% of the traffic on Woods Hole Road was attributed to vessels traveling to the vehicles traveling to the Steamship Authority ferries. Efforts to reduce the congestion by shifting some route to off-Cape Port would likely have minimal results. The freight trucks are a small portion of the Cape's total traffic, and shipment of freight via truck is impacted by general congestion on Cape Cod roadways, which may increase travel time and influence a desire to operate from elsewhere. To better understand the various impacts of the freight trucks on Falmouth and the community may benefit from an analysis that explores roadway speeds, safety, noise, and other factors. And additionally, the stakeholders should explore other options to reduce the impact of freight trucks on roadways, including freight consolidations, a shift in ferry schedules, and strategies to reduce overall traffic. And should an off-Cape port be identified, it will be important to ensure that shifting of the operations does not simply transfer the issue to a new location. And lastly, the results indicated that the shift to the scenario. So the scenario that they did was an operations out of New Bedford, although New Bedford did not specifically state that would be something that they would be, he did not participate in the study, but the scenario that they modeled was using New Bedford, in that the results indicate that a shift, as modeled in the report, namely shifting non-bulk freight between Martha's Vineyard and mainland Massachusetts, would generate additional NOx and CO2 emissions. So over the transit time of the trucks. Again, this was something that MassDOT did, and we became aware of it very late in the process. They did reach out to us at that time to just confirm some data that they had gotten from our website or other publications. But beyond that, that's our extent in the participation in this report. So.
Bob, a point of reference, we have that whole report in our packet, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
And
Any questions on Bob's report? Rob?
Yeah, just curious, Bob, looks like this was done in September. It's May. Has this been available? It just hasn't come to light, or how did it take so long to get in the hands of us?
Yeah, so well, part of this was that I think this May, the September date, I think it wasn't actually issued until a little bit later. We were watching it, once we were aware of it, we were watching their website and trying to see when it was posted, but I ended up reaching out to MassDOT and Urban Harvest about getting a copy of the report. We did get the report. We did include it in the February board meeting packet because it came after the February port council meeting. And again, I apologize that as I didn't follow up and have it added to the March nor April port council meetings is an oversight on my part. So it apparently wasn't actually released until February, so. They have a September date, because they had to have, MassDOT had to sign off on it, and Federal Highway had to sign off on it, so.
I noticed one of the authors is C. Johnson. Is that Craig Johnson? Or is that somebody else?
Yes, that's Craig Johnson.
Okay. I mean, obviously he knows the steamship well, and I guess I would have thought we would have known what was coming, and he had access to a lot of data. It sounds like they didn't really interact with us much in terms of the research, in terms of using us as primary source of information.
Yeah.
Is that true?
And, part of it was that, by the time we were made aware of, the report and the extent of the report, they're already, doing their due diligence in terms of data collection and things like that.
Okay, thanks. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to study it. I'm sure that my colleagues haven't probably either in great depth, but it's certainly another point on the curve for us to understand.
All right, any other
you.
questions on that report? All right, Bob, you want to move on?
Yeah, so next item we have is the proposed 2023 winter and spring operating schedules. So the winter schedule would run from January 3rd, 2023 to March 27th. And that would start 2 days earlier and end 2 days earlier than the 2022. And that's for both routes. The spring schedule, meanwhile, would start on March 28th and run to May 17th, which would mean it would start 2 days earlier and end 1 day later than the 2022 schedules. On the Martha's Vineyard route, the motor vessel Martha's Vineyard, Island Home and Container will be assigned to this schedule. In the wintertime, the Nantucket will replace the Island Home during its repair period from January 9th to February 22nd. In 2022, we had the same vessels, except the Island Home is replaced by the Nantucket and the Woods Hole, while it was because it had a longer repair period because of the shipyard repair as well, dry dock. The schedule will be the same as in 2022, with no change in the trip times, the quantity of the trips, the vessel crewing or the assigned vessels. Each boat would be triple crewed and could operate up to 7 round trips. The spring schedule, meanwhile, is the same schedule and crewing assignments as 2022. The one minor change is during the MV Martha's Vineyard scheduled spruce up. The MV Nantucket will operate in its place from May 15th to May 17th. On the Nantucket route, the winter schedule, the Nantucket schedule will be the same as 2022, with no change in the trip times, the quantity of trips, vessel crewing or assigned vessels. The Eagle and the Gayhead will operate this schedule with the exception of from January 3rd to January 8th, when the Nantucket will operate in place of the Eagle and the Woods Hole will operate in place of the Gayhead. Each boat, again, is triple crewed and operate up to 3 round trips a day. The Gayhead is scheduled to operate 3 round trips Monday through Saturday, and will have the ability to run 3 round trips, up to 3 round trips on Sundays. The spring schedule would see no change in the trip times, the assigned vessels, the crewing assignments as this current schedule. So in March, the authority placed newspaper advertisements for the proposed 2023 winter spring operating schedules for both its Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket routes for the period of January 3rd, 2023 through May 17th, 2023. Notices were also posted on our website for public comment, in which we received none. So at this point, staff is going to be recommending that the 2023 winter and spring operating schedules be approved as proposed.
Bob, are you looking for a vote on this today from us?
Yes, please.
Any questions from what Bob just shared? Not seeing any. I'll take a motion to approve the,
Make it.
yep. Does somebody make?
Second.
Make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote. Nat,
Aye.
all right. Rob,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
and Mark,
Aye.
and Cahill, aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to the treasurer's report.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, Mark.
So we'll go over the business summary for the month of March. If Sean could throw that up on the screen, please. Okay, so for the month of March, for on the Vineyard route for passengers carried, we saw an increase compared to last year of 8.2%, or just over 8,500 passengers. On the Nantucket route, we saw a decrease of 563 passengers. In total passengers combined in both routes, we saw an increase of about 8,000 passengers. Year to date, both routes combined were up about 26,000 passengers, or 8.5%. Here's a graph showing the monthly comparison of passengers from this year and last year. Okay, so here we got the vehicles for the passenger vehicles. So on the Vineyard route, we saw a total decrease of 219 vehicles, or 0.7%. We saw the excursion fare vehicles up while the standard fare vehicles were down. On the Nantucket route, we saw an increase of 406 vehicles, where the excursion vehicles were up and the standard fare autos were down. For the month of March, we saw an increase of 187 passenger vehicles compared to last year, 0.5%. And both routes combined were up 375 passenger vehicles compared to last year. Okay, and here we're showing the monthly comparison of the vehicles. Freight trucks, i.e. vehicles over 20 feet in length, on the Vineyard route for the month of March, we saw an increase of 2.2%, or 100 trucks, and these are one ways. On the Nantucket route, we saw an increase of 280 trucks at 10.9%. Both routes combined were up 5.4%. Year to date, both routes combined are up 2.5%, or 446 trucks, 163 on the Vineyard route and 283 on the Nantucket route. And again, here's a chart just showing the monthly comparison. Cars parked for the month of March. The Vineyard route was up 400 cars. The Nantucket route, and it's not a typo, was exactly the same as last year. I was a little bit higher on the Nantucket side than the Hyannis side. And both routes combined were up 9.6% for the month of March. Total cars parked for the year compared to last year is up 1,600 cars, or 16.7%.
Hey, Mark,
You-
just a question. Can you go
Sure.
back to that slide for a second?
Sure.
What do you attribute that increase? I know it's just parking, but why?
It's also, you're looking at the passengers are up as well. Last year,
Yeah.
most of the people were traveling with their car.
Yeah.
And now you have more foot traffic, more people are not working from home, either commuting more,
Yeah,
more service visits than in the
Got it.
past.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, trip summary. So for the month of March, on the Vineyard route, we had 8 trips canceled for mechanical, 16 for weather, and 8 for traffic, bringing the year-to-date total on the Vineyard route to 15 mechanical trips and 97 weather and 86 for traffic. On the Nantucket route for the month of March, we had 0 trips canceled for mechanical, 8 for weather, and 2 for traffic demands, bringing the total for Nantucket for the year-to-date of 0 mechanical cancellations, 41 for weather, and 36 for traffic. Both routes combined year-to-date have 15 trips canceled for mechanical reasons, 138 for weather, and 122 for traffic demands. Financial snapshot for the month of March, we had operating revenue of $6,072,000, which was higher than budget by $226,000. We had other income of $992,000, which was higher than budget by $937,000. And this is the realization of the grant revenue we talked about last month as a timing issue. Operating expenses of $10,641,000 was higher than budget by $814,000. We had income deductions of 151,000, which was lower than budget by just over $3,000. In putting this all together for the month of March, we had a net operating loss of $3,726,000, which was lower than budget by $352,000. Okay. Year to date, we have sorry, Sean. We have a net operating loss of $11,379,000, which is lower than budget by $616,000. Okay.
Good job. Thank you.
Okay. Quickly on the operating revenue, we can see the total other income up 937,000. That is that timing of the grant revenue, and we're a little bit behind for the year to date, about 500,000, which we expect to realize in the second quarter. Here's a breakdown of the operating revenues for the month of March and year to date. Basically, where's all the money coming in from? And as we get later in the year, you'll see the pivot from the freight to more of the passenger and vehicles on that previous chart. Operating expense, we see maintenance expense about up 600,000 this month, and that's a timing issue on the realization of the expenses in the dry dock. And you can see year to date, we're still under budget on the maintenance expenses by 253,000. So for the month, we had operating expenses were up 814,000, but year to date, we're down 654,000. And here's a breakdown of the operating expenses for the month of March as well, January through March. Real quick, for the first 3 weeks of April, since we're in May, total passengers are up just under 9,900 passengers in both routes, or 8.1%. Year to date, passengers are up 36,000 or 8.4%. So these are falling more in line with 2019, getting closer. Vehicles carried so far through April on the Vineyard route, we're off about 1,371 cars. And you can see again, it's the regular cars being down, while the excursion vehicles are up. And on the Nantucket route, we're seeing the same thing. So getting a little back more to normal traffic patterns. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Mark, thank you for all this. This is good stuff. I wish the state reps were watching. Thank you.
It's just a curiosity question.
Go ahead.
I'm surprised Nat didn't answer. Maybe he knows the answer, and that's why more trucks going to Nantucket than Martha's Vineyard.
It could just be timing. I mean,
Oh, if I could answer that. It's,
early in the year, so.
I know it's not.
Yeah, March is to Rob. March is just the tail. Well, the tail end of March is the beginning of landscape season. When April comes in, it'll be a lot more because of that. Modulars, you don't have anything to do with that, Mark, on these numbers, right? The modular houses.
No,
Is this
that would cover the barge. And some of it
It
could be
doesn't
simple,
count.
Rob, as the way the calendar falls on weekdays, weekends for some of these small numbers.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. Just a curiosity question.
Yeah.
I second what Nat said. This is really good information. It's helpful to have it distilled this way. So thank you.
No matter how many less cars there are, single, one ways, the people will still think that we're bringing more cars, no matter what you say, no matter what numbers you show. But that's the reality, is there's cars are already on the island in garages in these houses. And there's less of that flow of vehicles coming over for the season. It's more of the rentals and the one-time trip type stuff than it is like it used to be back and when people would come over with the vehicles for the actual houses. They leave them in New York or wherever they're coming from and they fly here. So anyway, thank you.
Speaking of curiosity in Nantucket, just curious if Nat's paying off the steamship authority because he has 0 mechanicals
Well, that's why I was just, I was just figured term limits are gonna fix all these big problems, right?
I'm not touching that one, sir. not going there.
I am. I don't have any problem touching it at all.
All right. I have one question for Mark, and that is, Mark, what was the grant for? That was.
That grant was part of the 5307 funds we get in cooperation with the CCRTA on an annual basis.
Got it. Thank you.
Another great piece of news that didn't get explained correctly, right there.
Yep. All right. Any more questions before we move on to proposed draft? Seeing none, let's go forward.
Okay, thank you. So in the packet is the budget policy, and frankly, it hasn't changed materially from the previous years as far as the methodology we're going to do. So for the revenues, we're going to budget our projected revenues based on the most recent 12 months of traffic and look at making any adjustments if necessary if we see any dramatic changes in traffic patterns like we saw a couple of years ago with COVID. We'll also look at any impacts, if known, about any of the service, like with the RFPs that are out, if that's going to have any impact on our revenue as well. Operating expenses, maintenance and repairs. Next year, we're going to have 5 vessels in the dry dock. We're looking at the Gay Head, the Governor, the Martha's Vineyard, the Sankaty, and the Woods Hole. As with every year, we'll be working with the maintenance department. So Mark and his team getting an itemized list of their expenses, what projects they have going on, both for the vessels as well as the land side. Employment, we're expecting the same level of employment as we did in the previous year's budget and filling any necessary unfilled positions. We will be adding in the COO into next year's budget calculations as well. Okay.
And the grant person?
And the grant person, yes. Training, the authority will continue to provide training for its employees to make sure we ensure a safe and efficient operations. Example of some of the training classes we have are STCW training, bridge resource management, oil spill response, facility and vessel security officer training, customer service training, cybersecurity training, computer training, health and environmental training, and other classes, just to name a few. Use of information systems, again, we'll be looking at leveraging IT. And as previously mentioned by Mr. Cahill's question to Sean, we work with both the user as well as the computer department to finding out if we're making any changes. Are we going to a cloud-based where we're not going to have the physical asset here, where it's hosted on site? Are there any changes in support services? One vendor is being removed, replaced with another. So we go through all that during the budget process to see what changes we have. Vessel fuel oil, price of crude is trading anywhere from $95 to $115 a barrel. Last year at this time was in the $60 to $65 range. So that's something we're working with our consulting on hedging. This year we are hedged for the full, for 2022, we are hedged. We are only hedged roughly through the first quarter of 2023. One thing we are noticing is that the actual cost of buying a hedge has increased as well because of the risk. Last year we were paying in the 20 cents area per contract per gallon. Now we're looking at some of those hedges have gone to 40 to 45 cents. So not only is the price higher, but the actual cost of buying the insurance is higher as well. So that's something we're looking at and we'll incorporate in our budget. Utilities will continue to pursue energy conservation measures, but we'll also look at ways of possibly reducing our supply charges. And so debt administration, with the interest rates where they are now, we don't foresee any savings and restructuring. And if we do a new debt offering, we'll incorporate any costs into the budget. Advertising, we work with Sean and his team on that. And again, we'll be shifting more to a digital advertising more than the paper, the hard advertising as in the past. And then for the fund transfers and use of special purpose funds, next year we have debt service requirements of $1,317,000 in September 2023 for interest, and an interest and principal payment of $9,442,000 in March of 2024. So we want to make sure we have the appropriate cash transfers in place to make sure we fund those debt payments. And after all that, we'll make every reasonable effort to make sure we don't have any or minimize any fare adjustments. So, like I said, same methodologies we've used in the past, and we tweak it to the most current information we have with inflation and traffic patterns and supply chain issues. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has on the budget.
Mark, it seems very thorough. Any
Yeah.
questions?
Nope. Beautiful.
All right, thank you, Mark. Nice
And
job.
So we're looking for a vote on that, if you don't
Okay.
mind, to approve the.
How would we make that as a motion? Motion to approve the proposed budget?
Budget policy as presented.
The 2023, I'll move that.
All right.
Second.
Got a second? All right, roll call. I'll start off with, or first, any discussion? All right, Joe? Salute.
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And Nat?
Aye.
And Cahill, aye. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, and the last item on the treasurer's report is the cost of service we do annually. We've been doing this since 2004. And this also touches a little bit on what Rob, Mr. Munier was mentioned earlier about the looking at the vessels that we do basically have a profit and loss with the direct and indirect cost of all the vessels operating each year. And that's on page 35 of 188. But what I'll do today is focus on for route specific and how each route did last year. And Sean, can you throw that up on the screen, please?
Yeah, 1 second.
Mark, if he's doing that, what is this on page 35 of 188? Where would I find that?
So that would be in the packet. So in the board packet, that is page 269 of 422.
All right, I'll track you down if I can't find it. Thank you.
And we'll make sure that you get the individual packet, and you'll be getting a hard copy of this as well. Every year we send a hard copy out.
Okay,
Okay, so here we're breaking down how we did compared to last year, and basically how much does a car, the freight deck space of a car unit cost, and how much is each vehicle who's traveling covers that cost. So we're looking at from 2021 to 2020, we saw all indirect and direct costs increased about $2.8 million. On item D, we're looking at the number of trips. We also increased as we're post-COVID, about 1,800 trips. So even though we had an increase in costs, the number of trips offset that, where in item E, our actual cost per trip to operate was down by $288. So we're looking at item, if we can scroll down, so G and H, we see the number of vehicles we carried, which obviously with the trips that we increased in the traffic levels we had, we increased the number of automobiles and trucks carried from the previous year. So then we look at item K, and that shows the total amount of spaces that we carried, or a car, what we call a car equivalent unit. So if we converted a semi into a car, it would be roughly 3 to 4 cars. So we saw an increase of about 96,600 spaces occupied. Running the more trips, which goes to total capacity of M, we increased our total capacity of car spaces by 89,000 last year. And then since we carried more spaces than we had more capacity, we saw the occupancy rate in letter N increase by 3% compared to the previous year. Okay, so in letter O, we see what the passenger revenue was. Then we get the automobile revenue and the freight revenue, and the total revenue for the Vineyard route increased by 14.4 million. Okay, we can go to the next page. So then we look at item P, which is what our total revenue per trip is, then what the passenger revenue is per trip on Q. And then we have our cost allocated per trip and in the packet, and not to get tied up because there's a lot of information. In tab 3, it tells you how we allocate the indirect cost to the vessels, whether it's the amount of reservations activity we make to do the reservation bureau, what it might be. Then we take out the passenger revenue, and then we come out to on line U with the two red circles of how much freight deck space revenue we need to break even on the trip. So we saw, because of the costs associated earlier, we saw that the revenue and the increase in passenger revenue, the freight deck space that we needed per year, the revenue was down $540 in 2021 compared to 2020 to break even. Item V shows the amount that the each car cost, the unit would cost per space. W is the average revenue we received per vehicle. And then item X shows what percentage that the standard fare covers 136.7% of the cost to provide the service, while an excursion fare auto covers 33.8%. In that $22.99 for the excursion fare, we back out the passenger revenue. And then item Z shows what the trucks are paying, covering what percentage of the space the truck, each type of truck category is paying. And then going through the same exercise on the Nantucket route, we saw costs increase about 1.5 million. On letter E, the cost per trip was down $204 because the trips increased by 342. We carried 9,800 more automobiles. We increased by 5,800 total trucks, and that includes pickup trucks, for the record. And so we had a total amount of spaces occupied increased by just under 27,000 spaces. We increased the capacity by just under 17,000 spaces. And on the Nantucket run, we saw a bigger increase in the occupancy rate of 5.5% or 86.4% occupancy. For the revenue on the Nantucket route, we saw an increase of just under $7.4 million. And here we can see what the balance per trip is. They don't run as many trips and their trips are longer, so obviously their costs are higher per trip. But we did see the cost per trip on letter U decrease by $416 per trip. Here we can see in letter V how much it costs for each space to be transported. And letter W shows you how much revenue we make per standard fare vehicle. A standard fare is $241 versus an excursion fare is $60. And where the standard fare pays 155% of the cost, while the excursion fare pays 39% of the cost. And in letter Z, we show the same calculations on the trucks. And I know it's a lot of information, but I want to give a high level view of, to where we actually, for the budget, we look at what type of vehicles paying what percentage of their costs, and where also mentioned, what's the most efficient use of our vessels as well.
Mark, could you summarize what you've learned from that?
So this year we saw, because we had an increase in passenger revenue, we had an increase in the amount of trips where the indirect, a lot of those are fixed. We're able to get the cost per trip down from last year, 2020, because we didn't have the passenger revenue offsetting the operating costs, and as well as we didn't have the aggregate number of trips and overall raw number higher. The cost per trip was higher. This year with the volume, we're able to get that cost per trip down.
Got it. Okay.
And one thing is that the occupancy rates have increased. Even though we ran more trips, the occupancy rates were higher.
Okay. Questions?
If I may?
Yes.
So, one of the things that, Mark, we need to point out here too, is that this is done on the basis of all trips for a year, the occupancy. And obviously there's certain times of the year where travel is directional. Beginning of the summer, more vehicles going to the islands. And it's not until the fall they come back. So the fact that we're up at 82.6% occupancy on the Vineyard route, and actually 86.4% on the Nantucket route. That's probably about the limit of where you need to be, because you know, that particularly the 86.4% to me indicates that we're probably pretty much at capacity there, you know, because of the directionality of service. You know, the need to, for the space it comes. So that all plays a role in this as we look at operating schedules and the like.
And
Thank
the other thing, John, is when we're looking at when we break it down by vessel, it's going to fluctuate year to year depending on which boat's in the dry dock. So if you have a dry dock,
Right.
you have obviously higher expenses. So it's, 1 year is not a fair comparison comparing vessel to vessel.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my points. The also, in the old days, we used to have, before we had the Woods Hole, the Nantucket was running a lot more out here and on the Vineyard route, sort of mixed, and there's all kinds of moving parts with this report that Mark does now. We call it the Flathers report. I'd like to make some sort of a notation. I'd like to name the hedging report the George Balco report for to continue our nostalgic, historic references. So, because George, I'll tell you what, George was all over that. That was his big one. So you guys know. Anyway, this is good stuff,
Good to
Mark.
know.
Appreciate you doing this. This kind of stemmed from the old, back in the day, arguments between the Vineyard and Nantucket when we were sort of subsidized by the Vineyard. And it actually, it's a great piece, a great tool for us because of the mileage of the vessels. They know exactly how many trips every boat makes to each island, right down to the gallon. It's unbelievable. So it's good. And it'll also help us with the efficiency of, hopefully, when we get these larger boats, especially for us, because we'll be able to carry a little more with the same number of trips. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any more questions for Mark? All right, should we, we don't need a vote on this, just analysis, correct? Yep.
Just
So,
information.
moving on to old and new business. Bob, do you want to say anything?
I didn't have anything under old and new.
I have one question for you, Bob. Is there any update on Port Council members for New Bedford and Hyannis?
No word on it for New Bedford. My understanding is that the appointments committee for the town of Barnstable unanimously endorsed Bud Brialt for the position on the Port Council. And I believe it comes up for the first reading tomorrow at the, I need to double check, but I believe it's going to be on the town council's agenda at their Wednesday meeting. They typically require 2 readings, but they have waived them in the past.
Yeah.
Mr. Brialt has worked for the town. He was previously the Barnstable Airport manager. Prior to that, he had a distinguished career in the Coast Guard and actually served as the captain of the Woods Hole Station and lived in Nobsca Lighthouse. So he'd be a welcome addition to the Port Council. So
I'll second that, and thank you, Bob. Any old new business from the Port Council members? All right, seeing none, let's open it up. Anybody from the press want to ask any questions of the Port Council?
I don't think we have any press on currently.
All right, I'll take a motion. What's that?
yeah, it doesn't look like anyone's raising their hand for public comment.
All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mark, I'll let you go first this time.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, and it's say yes?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Joe?
Yes.
All right, Rob?
Yes.
Nat?
Aye.
Aye, and Cahill, aye. Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
See you next month.